Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
He's alive!
Welcome to Where the Weird Ones Are.
Every time I speak, I want the truth to come out.
Powerful figures in Hollywood as well as powerful politicians who are in fact not human. They're reptiles or they're lizards or perhaps extraterrestrials.
I don't think it is a human. I think it's a Sasquatch.
Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.
Let's get weird.
What's up, you fucking weirdos? Welcome to Where the Weird Ones Are. My name is Kevin. I am your host. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Anyways, so today on the podcast, we have Orin, who is from the Framework UFO Research Center. He's also joined today with his partner, Jenny. If you remember back from episode 13, they were both on talking about some of Jenny's experiences. Well, today we get into some high strangeness, mainly with Orin's research. It tends to be around national parks, military bases. So Orin is working on a book dedicated to his research and all that, and I'm gonna try and stop saying so much or so I apologize for that. Anyways, the conversation was phenomenal. They were a treat, as they were the last time they were on. I had a lot of fun. They seemed to have a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy it, but I'm first gonna tell you a story. So this story takes place on August 20th, 1976. It is labeled as the Allagash abductions. It's probably the most famous UFO sighting in Maine. It was actually they did an episode of it on Unsolved Mysteries. It takes place in Allagash, Maine. If you don't know anything about Maine, Allagash is all the way the fuck up on the cusp of Canada. So where I live, I'm all the way down towards the bottom. So if you're looking at Maine as a map, if you're looking at Maine on the map, you'll see where Maine comes down and starts coming into New Hampshire. But it's still ocean, seaside. It's still the coastal. I'm down right there near New Hampshire. Allagash is directly straight all the way to the top, right near Canada, right on the border. Anyways, so this incident takes place on Eagle Lake in Allagash. It's an Allagash waterway. It's a part of the Allagash waterway in northern Maine. So these four dudes, they were in their early 20s, I believe, too. So it's Jack and Jim Weiner, Charlie Foltz, and Chuck Rack. They all went on a fishing trip via canoe. So they wanted to go canoeing the Allagash waterway and, do some fishing. And, basically have like a guy's fishing trip, all that. And so Allagash is very remote. There's very little people living out there. It's basically all wilderness, especially around the waterways. So with that being said, none of these guys were familiar with the area. I don't really recall where any of them are actually from, but I do believe they all are from Maine. They're obvious. They just weren't from Allagash or the immediate area. So they built a large campfire before they left their campsite so that they could find their campsite later on when they were done fishing. So they set off. They go out and they're in the canoe and they're fishing. And I think it was a few hours had gone by. It's not dark, but it's getting dark. So it's dusk. So while they're fishing, they observe a bright object appear over the trees, and it's kind of like moving like this, and it's fairly it's a ways off in the distance. It's just right above the tree line, just kind of like doing this shit, you know. And they observe it's round, so it's basically like a ball, just kind of going like this. So they see it and it's changing colors, and it's changing from red, green to yellow. Now, when I first heard this, I'm like, did they do a bunch of drugs and then they're stopped at an intersection at a freaking traffic light, fucking seeing these three colors? But they're out in the wilderness. They're out in the fucking middle of nowhere. There's not even any really street lights, let alone traffic lights. So, anyways, they end up taking out their flashlights and beaming it right on the object, and they send an SOS, which turns out to be a mistake, because this thing comes fucking flying directly at them and beams this fucking big bright light directly in their fucking face, and they're just like, ah, and it's coming straight for them. And then almost all of a sudden, or at least all of a sudden to them, they were back at their campsite, and this thing was hovering above them for a good couple minutes before it just sped off and disappeared, and they never saw it again. So they ended up having some intense nightmares after this, and doing some counseling, psychiatry and whatnot. They actually ended up recovering some of their memories, and they realized, all four of them, they all realized together that they had been abducted. So now they're like, oh, this was aliens. This is what that was. They recounted were large-eyed creatures doing some embarrassing physical examinations, which I don't have to go into detail. I'm sure you can figure out what that was. And Orin, if you're watching this, you can look this up. But Allagash Wilderness is a national park here in Maine. And it just so happens that there was an abduction. So, anyways, without further ado, I will say my goodbyes, and I will allow you guys to watch or listen to this conversation that Orin and I had. Jenny joins in as well. You can contact Orin at the Framework UFO Research Center. So if you have any kind of stories regarding this stuff, especially if it has to do with national parks, please reach out to him. He's doing all the research that he can. He is welcoming any kind of stories that can help connect the dots and basically build the structure, because you can't have a house without the framework. So, other than that, if you guys want to come on this podcast, share your stories, I welcome you with open arms. You can contact me at wheretheweirdonesare@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram. and that is where_the_weird_ones_are. And you can follow my sister. She's not here. She's not in this episode. Um, but you can still follow her at T Sapiel on Instagram. It's TSAPIEL. And what else? What else do I got? I have a TikTok. You can follow it if you want. You don't have to. I don't really. It's not really for the podcast. It's more of like random shit that I do. But that is Kevin. This is on TikTok. You're welcome to follow that. But again, that's not a necessity. What I'm more concerned about is my Instagram and getting to connect with all of you lovely people. So, yeah. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did. So, with that being said, I'm going to need you guys to look right here. Let's get weird.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it.
All right, we're here with Orin from the Framework UFO. He has some experiences. So I just want to say, when I grew up in the 90s, I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s. The very first experience I've ever had where I've ever heard of anything Men in Black was Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones.
Yep,
So every time
absolutely.
anybody ever mentions the Men in Black, those are the two faces that I always see every time, no matter what.
No,
So
it took me a while to realize that there was more to it than that. And,
yeah,
there's more than movies and the comic books.
right. So do you want to start right there with your experience with the Men in Black there?
Sure. So just a little bit of background about myself and what we're doing.
Oh
Before
yeah,
I
true.
dive
Sorry,
into that. No problem.
skipping shit.
So my name is Orin Felix. This is my partner Jenny. We're with the Framework UFO Research Center, and so kind of what we're doing. I've always been into weird stuff, aliens, cryptids, anything like that. And a few years ago, I had what I would consider a recovered memory about a Men in Black experience, and that's what I'm going to share here in a few minutes. But that kind of got me seriously researching and looking into the paranormal and aliens and things of that nature. And it didn't take me very long researching and reading to see that there's a whole lot of strange things going on, and you don't have to dig very far below the surface to see everything might not be as straightforward as we've been led to believe. And I started to see these connections between all these different paranormal phenomena. And so I just started like taking notes and making like a Word document, just for my own benefit, just so I could keep my own thoughts straight. And then at some point, I had like 10,000 words in this Word document of notes. I was like, man, I need to do something with this. So I started trying to kind of organize it into kind of a book outline. So I've been working on that. And in the meantime, we just kind of wanted to start meeting people and networking, going to conventions and whatnot. So that's kind of where we're at now. My partner, Jenny, she's had some pretty crazy paranormal shadow people type experiences. You were, gracious enough to have us on, and she shared some of that. So everybody should check out that episode if they haven't. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at now. And I'll jump right into the Men in Black story if you want me to.
Perfect. I would love it.
Okay, so starting off, I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, across the river from a very large military base. This base is called Camp Lejeune. It was started in the 40s, and we all know about all the weirdness that was going on in the 40s. The land for the base was actually seized by the government for eminent domain. The base was built, and currently there's like this huge class action toxic water lawsuit going on with this base. So, a lot of just run of the mill kind of strangeness going on with this place right off the bat. So when I was a kid, I was homeschooled, and one day, it was probably late spring, early summer. Me and my mom and my sister were at home. We were doing schoolwork. My dad was at work. And my recollection is a white, like, Chevy Astro van, like the early mid-90s Chevy vans, just totally standard looking, pulls up
the
in
free
our
candy
yard.
vans.
Exactly. So this white van pulls up in our yard. And out of the van, these two guys come out, and they've got, like, black pants, black ties, black sunglasses. I remember them having, like, short sleeve white dress shirts and no jackets. But again, this is, summertime in North Carolina. It's hot, it's humid. So I don't know if maybe that has something to do with it. So anyway, these guys just start walking around the perimeter of our yard. Like, they didn't come up to the house. They didn't, try to engage in any way that I saw. They're just, like, looking around, almost like they were looking for something. And so I guess at this point, my mom decided there's something kind of weird going on. And she told me, take your sister, go hide in the bedroom closet. If I don't come back and get you guys in a while, leave the house, run down the road to your aunt's house and call the police or whatever. So in my recollection, it doesn't seem like it was very long after that she came back and got us. And, like, nothing was ever said about it. Like, my mom didn't say anything about what happened. She just, like, got us out of the closet, and we just kind of all went about our business. Like, we didn't talk about it. Even when my dad came home that night, like, nothing was said about it. Like, not even, hey, Dad, we had this weird thing happen today. So it seems like everybody's reaction to this, at least strange situation that happened was, like, really underplayed and didn't fit kind of what it had happened, really. And so fast forwarding a couple years back, my father died suddenly, and me and my mom were on a road trip to pick up my sister. And funny enough, I had just watched a Ancient Aliens episode about Men in Black, like, a couple of months prior to this, and I, something they said in the episode, I was like, holy crap, that happened to me when I was a kid. And so I started, like, looking into the whole Men in Black thing pretty seriously at that point. And when we were on this, road trip, of course, emotions are high and whatnot. And so at some point I was just like, hey, I think I remember this thing happening. I need to know if this actually happened, or am I just making all this up? So I, just spilled everything I just told you. And my mom was like, yeah, that absolutely did happen. And my sister, who couldn't have been more than like 3 or 4 at the time, she says she remembers this happening too. So I don't know how much stock to put in that, considering she was so young. But I was probably like 9 or 10 at the time. So it's not like I was super duper young. I was old enough to have kind of known what was going on and remember this stuff. And so I asked my mom, I was like, why did we never talk about this? Why wasn't this more of a thing than it was? And my mom said that she had, like, no recollection of what transpired between when she sent us into the closet and when she came and got us. It was kind of my understanding at the time she was, like, going to go outside and, confront these guys and, what the hell are y'all doing in our yard?
Right.
She said she has no recollection of going outside. She had no recollection of talking to these guys. She had no recollection of anything until she came and got us out of the closet. And, we kind of joked around, but not joked that, she was zapped by the Men in Black.
She got the flashy thing.
Exactly. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the story.
Yeah.
But as I got digging deeper into, this whole Men in Black phenomenon, and then just the general area where I grew up, where this base is, I started seeing a lot of weird things. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea, there's kind of two schools of thought when it comes to the Men in Black. There's, these otherworldly John Keel type Men in Black,
Mm-hmm.
and there's more of like the government agents. And it was my recollection that these were just normal human beings. They didn't strike me as they were anything otherworldly. They seemed to, walk like humans, behave like humans.
Right.
I think these were totally just government agents. I don't think there was anything, otherworldly going on. But I think it absolutely had to do with the base that was, located 100 yards across the river from where we lived. And the more I, kind of got digging and thinking about all this, and like me and my sister have talked since my parents' deaths about like all this weird stuff that went on when we were kids that we didn't really think was weird at the time, but like looking back, it was. So I never really saw anything paranormal growing up. I never saw a UFO, never saw cryptids, anything like that. But that property always had like a very heavy feeling. It just felt dark and scary. And, at the time I chalked it up to, just scared, stupid kids. And then it wasn't until I like went away to college that I was like, no, everywhere else doesn't feel like this place does.
Mm-hmm.
And even like coming back as an adult, like it still had a weird, dark feeling, energy, whatever you want to call it there. Like, even if you'd have to like run out and get something out of the car at night, like you ran as fast as you could, you took a flashlight, you ran right back. It was just weird. And when I was a kid, there was constant like helicopter military activities going on, like during the day, but at night it seemed like it would really amp up. Like almost every night there was like groups of helicopters, 6, 7, 8 helicopters doing maneuvers like all around this area. I mean, we could see from our house. They flew right over the house. They were shooting off like flares all the time, and my parents would just be, oh well, the Marines are out there shooting off flares, they must be looking for something. And now like looking back, I'm like, well, what were they looking for? It just seems like an odd comment for somebody to make off the cuff. And like my parents were not like really into paranormal or anything like that, especially at that point, like just very, conservative, hardworking people. But anyway, I didn't know this at the time, but these military flares that they shoot up to provide light, I guess, for these maneuvers or whatever they were possibly looking for, it's kind of like a box that the actual flare shoots out of, and then there's like a parachute type apparatus on top of it. And at some point in time when I was a kid, one of these things landed in our yard. So I don't know if they like didn't shoot it off properly, it didn't go where they wanted it to go, but this flare ended up in our yard. There's like pictures of me as a kid like playing in this parachute from this. So like I said, just a lot of weird things that I didn't realize were weird at the time, but now, looking back.
Right.
And then at some point when I got older, like my later teenage years, it seemed like a lot of the helicopter activity really slowed down or even stopped. And I find that odd that like this was basically a nightly occurrence for years, like over a decade. And then at some point in time, it just petered out to nothing. And so I think that's really weird. I mean, if they're doing training and whatnot, you wouldn't expect that to just randomly stop. And, thinking back about this whole situation, I think there are two options. I think either they did lose something, they were looking for something. They were seeing, if it was in our yard, whatever they lost, or I think what I've decided is the more likely scenario, they wanted to see what we could see from our property, from our vantage point, because
That makes sense.
it wasn't like they were like on hands and knees with magnifying glasses looking for stuff. They were just like walked around the yard, like very casual, walked out to the water line. So after, telling this story a few times and talking to people, that's what I think. I think they wanted to see what we could see. And
That seems highly plausible. Like, that's very intelligible of you to think that way. Were there like any mountains in like mountainous area where you lived, or
so no, this was on the coast, like very rural.
so like almost flat, kind of not
Yeah,
flat, but you know what I mean?
but kind of piggybacking off of that point. So the area where this base is located, it backs right up to a national forest. It's called National Forest.
And they use national forests.
Yes.
From what I've gathered.
Yeah, so I can go on about I've got a whole list here about national forest stuff. So this national forest, the Croatan National Forest, there's sightings of a Bigfoot type creature that they call the Croatan Man. That's been reported in this forest. And, my dad used to take me mountain biking there when I was a kid, and I was always terrified of it. Like, nothing ever happened. We never saw anything, but for some reason, it just terrified me with no logical reason for me to be that scared of it. So this national forest that backs right up to this military base right across the water from where I grew up is one of 4 national forests in North Carolina. One of the other ones
is... I didn't realize there was 4 in North Carolina.
Yeah. And all of them have something kind of weird going on with them. The other big one is the Pisgah National Forest. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Brown Mountain Lights. I know North Carolina is kind of far from where you're at, but this mountain in North Carolina in this national forest is renowned for these, orbs, anomalous flying objects. Happens like almost nightly.
Is this like tie into the Chris Bledsoe stuff? Because I can't remember exactly where he was living when he was seeing these lights.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with him.
Chris Bledsoe. Okay. So Chris Bledsoe, this was probably, I want to say 60s, 70s. He actually passed away not too long ago. But his son has a podcast called Bledsoe Said So. And his son, Drew, I believe, no, not Drew. I can't recall his son's name, but anyway, so his son carries on the story, and they've met government officials. They've had people trying to keep them quiet, overseeing these lights and orbs in the sky on their property, and just all these types of experiences. And they have a lot of Men in Black encounters.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with them or that story. I definitely need to check that out. But
you definitely should.
Like something that's right in line with all of this. And I don't know if you've seen the series Hellier. I know it's kind of divisive in the paranormal community, but I think it's in season 1. They actually like go to Brown Mountain, North Carolina, and like try to get abducted by aliens, and all kind of strangeness supposedly ensues. But anyway, so that's in one of the other national forests in North Carolina. The third one is the Uwharrie National Forest, and that is a hotbed for Bigfoot, cryptid, all kinds of high strangeness activity. I mean, I've listened to probably a dozen podcasts talking about Bigfoot, Dogman, cryptid stuff in the Uwharrie. And then the fourth one, I believe it's pronounced the Nantahala National Forest, and it's in the Great Smoky Mountains, which is a hotbed for missing 411, missing persons type stuff. So each of these 4 national forests in North Carolina, there's at least something kind of bizarre going on in my research.
Wow. Have you looked into any national parks in South Carolina and Virginia around you and stuff like that too? Or?
I have not. I haven't branched out that far yet.
Okay. Is Is
still
this
kind of scratching the surface of all
right?
this stuff.
Right. So is this like stuff that's going into your book?
Yeah. So actually, the kind of main one I'm working on is more about like the connections that I found between
I
like
got
different paranormal phenomena, like how Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings and like orbs and whatnot are all reported, you know, in the same areas and the same time frames. But I am like kind of starting just like a spreadsheet with all this stuff about like my home situation and all that. So hopefully at some point I want to do something with that, but that's a little further down the line at this point because it's really hard to find information about this kind of stuff, especially with the whole military element and something I just thought of when I was on a podcast earlier this week. Somebody asked me, well, was there like UFO sightings around this area? And I was like, I don't remember anything like that, but
how would you know?
Exactly. Like,
Right.
like I was talking about, there was so much plane and helicopter, and there's lights in the sky all the time. There very well could have been stuff, and people just chalked it up to, oh, that was the military base,
Right.
So
when your mom goes out to confront these guys, and then she all of a sudden is like, I gotta go get the kids out of the closet. Does she like have any recollect, or did she have any recollection of being like, okay, it's okay, they gone, they left, or whatever, something like that at all?
my
She just
recollection is like nothing was said. She just came and got us, like, okay, and we just like went about our day. We went back to doing schoolwork. Like she didn't say what happened, didn't say that anything happened. So,
right.
and now looking back, that she has no recollection of that, that kind of makes more sense why nothing more was really said about it at the time.
Right. I was just wondering because where she remembers them being in the yard, but then she just came and got you. I was just curious on how, like what was she thinking when she let you out, basically.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. Like, basically, we all just kind of decided that something at least strange happened because
Right.
one, I mean, she just had however much basically missing time at that point, and everybody's reaction was really weird to this thing. So,
Yeah.
so I mean, even if it's just not anything paranormal and just run of the mill government shenanigans, I mean, at least something strange happened.
Right. Right. I kind of wonder if maybe they had, because so there's a lot of talk of all these military bases having underground tunnels and they all connect to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if maybe they were just out scouting around, like you said, probably seeing what you could see.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. And, kind of an idea I've been workshopping a little bit is going back to kind of the national parks and state parks thing. I wonder if national parks and military bases aren't chosen strictly for their, natural beauty or their military defense purposes. I wonder if these places are chosen because there's some sort of energy or portals or window areas or something like that, for lack of a better term, that's going on at these places, and they're chosen so, one, people don't just stumble into these places, and two, so the government can have a little bit more control over whatever is there.
Yeah. I believe that. Every national park that I've ever heard of has weird things happening, whether it's weird sightings of a weird animal that nobody's ever seen before, never been documented, or people missing under mysterious conditions. They could be standing right next to you almost, and then all of a sudden they're gone.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. It happens up here in Maine quite a bit. Actually, there's a story a couple miles to my east, right on the beach area in Wells, back in the 60s, where a man had an encounter with he calls it a man in black, but he didn't look like a man. He looked like what you would describe like almost a gray alien, just
Mhm.
dressed up in a suit. And he
Wow.
talked to him, had a full out conversation and everything. I don't remember the whole like story behind it, but I remember it happening and I remember it being talked about quite a bit.
So it kind of just popped into my head too. I don't know if you remember during Jenny's episode when she was talking about, when she lived at that beach house and things kind of started happening. She had like flannel man encounters. That was like basically on the other side of this base.
And there was some.
Oh, no shit.
Yes, there another beach like further up or down the coast.
Yeah, this base is huge. It takes up most of the county where I grew up.
Is this Fort Bragg?
No, this is Camp Lejeune. So
oh yeah, you said that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Fort Bragg is kind of more inland. This is like right on the coast, right on.
Okay. All right.
There were strange things that happened there. I was telling Orin just the other day, I said, something just like came out of the water one day, just like popped up like some sort of vehicle vessel, something just came from nowhere out of the water. As I recall, it looked like a floating tank to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just like, you don't talk about these things because first off, who's going to believe you? And second off, did I really just see that?
And so it came right out from underneath the water?
Yeah, just kind of like, like if you had a toy in the bathtub and you pushed it under and then it just came up. Yeah.
Yeah, so all sorts of weirdness going on in this general area, it seems like.
Wow. I feel like I want to come down there now.
No, we definitely want to go back down and like do some investigating at this point. So.
Yeah. So a couple of the girls that I've had on now are from Florida, and they actually are an investigative group.
Okay.
And my kids and I want to go to Miami, so that might be my first ever actual investigating.
That's awesome. Yeah, we haven't done any like actual, boots on the ground field work or anything like that yet. But
I want to.
Yeah. Me too.
It's in the cards, I think, at this point. So.
How's the tarot reading going, Jenny?
Good. It's like I'm getting better at it. I've pulled the same card 3 different times this week, which I haven't done the odds of pulling the same card 3 times. But no, it's good. I'm getting better at it. So yeah.
Good. The medium we talked to says that you keep the cards with you, keep them touching your skin, whatever. She said she used to wear them in her bra.
That's good. No, I sleep with mine sometimes.
Yeah, she said that too. She said you got to connect with them. You got to put your energy into it.
Yes.
So
that's good advice.
Good. I noticed you guys are wearing the same exact t-shirt.
Yes, so these are Kentucky Hopkinsville Goblin shirts. Jenny got them for us for Christmas, so we figured we'd sport them on the podcast tonight.
Nice, that's cool.
Yeah. So, but if you don't mind, I've got a little bit more to dive into this whole story.
Yes,
kind of the epilogue of it, if you will, if you don't mind me sharing. So, I've gone through the Men in Black experience, a little bit of background about the base and the area that I've been able to find. So, earlier this year, my mother passed away. So both my parents died. My father died very suddenly. My mom died about 8 months later. So obviously, like, this was a very traumatic, experience. A lot of negativity. We've had a lot of family drama go on in the wake of all this, involving, the property and my parents' estate and things of that nature. And so during all this, my sister has gone back and been staying at our childhood home a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And as she's been there, strange things have started to happen, more like kind of poltergeist, trickster type activity, stuff that I never remember experiencing when I was a kid growing up there. But, if this is a place that's a window area or where the veil is thinner and all this negative energy has been poured into it,
mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's, further thinned the veil. And then, she's a lonely, young woman in this isolated situation. That's going back to John Keel type stuff at that point.
Yeah.
So it's probably been a couple months ago now. She called us pretty late at night, like freaking out.
Oh.
And my sister said she was just laying in bed, just her and the dog, and just watching TV. And she said she had this thought, but it wasn't like a conscious thought. It was like something just beamed into her head, and it said, "Go look on top of the refrigerator." So she got up out of bed. She said didn't know why she did it. She just did it, and goes and looks on top of the refrigerator. And she had like just decorative, like kitchen chickens, like just knickknacks that people have in their kitchen. And she had 3 of these decorative kitchen chickens on top of the refrigerator. She said the bodies had been ripped off of the legs, and there's just 3 sets of legs on top of the refrigerator. And we were kind of joking around trying to talk her off the ledge at that point. We're like, that's just trickster stuff. You're going to find the bodies of them in the mailbox in a couple weeks or something like that. So that happened. She's got a relatively new vehicle, but she went through this spell for a couple weeks where like almost every morning when she'd go out to her car, her battery would be dead. And this was like in the fall. So, I mean, it wasn't like extreme weather or anything like that.
Right.
So she'd have to get her boyfriend to come over and give her a jump and whatever. And so the last time this happened, when they opened the hood to jump the car, the bracket that holds the battery in place was disconnected, and the actual like wires that hold that connect to the battery were disconnected. And obviously you'd have to get into the car to pop
Right.
the hood to do this. And I thought that was really interesting because that reminds me of all the accounts of car batteries dying and whatnot, electrical malfunctions, and all
Right.
kinds of paranormal high strangeness. So
Is
I
this
thought it was really weird that it was literally a car battery.
right? Is the property kind of sort of isolated?
Very much so. So this whole piece of land was my grandfather's farmland. And so there's a bunch of fields at the front part of the property, and then there's a strip of woods, and then there's just a clearing that they cleared out to put our home on when my parents got married and moved there. So it's extremely isolated, extremely rural. The driveway is probably a couple hundred yards.
Oh,
easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a long way even to the road, and even when you get to the road, that's still pretty isolated and rural at that point.
Oh wow.
So you got to drive 15-20 minutes to get to a McDonald's. So it's in the middle of nowhere basically.
That sounds like a perfect place for a hunting
Exactly.
Yeah.
or strange shit.
Yes.
Yeah, and so just other strange things have been happening since she's been there. She said she had just like a flower pot with a plant on it on the front porch. And she came home one day, and the plant was removed from the pot, but all the roots and everything were still intact. It was like it had just been plucked out of the pot, and it was set down like beside the door, but the pot was shattered. And so clearly, like, it wasn't like a dog just came through or something and knocked it over, because the plant was perfect. The plant was just sitting there beside the pot, and then it was like the pot just exploded. So that happened, and then there's just like normal like things missing in the house. She can't find this dress she's looking for, things like that. And then the most recent thing, she was getting ready to fly out for a trip. And so it was like 3 a.m. She was packing up the car, getting ready to leave. And she said in the stretch of woods behind the property, she heard this like huge something like running through the woods. And, we've heard deer, we've heard dogs. She said it was way bigger than that. It was rustling more than anything like that rustles. And then all of a sudden it just stopped, like just dead silent, nothing. And that got me thinking about something that my mom had just said in passing years before. So also on this property that my grandfather owned, he had a trailer park. And there's an elderly woman that lived in this trailer park, and she would have her grandchildren come over and stay with her periodically. And I guess she told my mom at some point in time that one of her grandsons said that they saw a big man running around in the woods carrying something on his shoulder. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if that has anything to do with this big rustling thing she had, but that's just some of kind of the high strangeness that's been going on here recently in this area.
Huh. That sounds like a Bigfoot kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know about the slinging, having something slung over his shoulder, but the fact that she heard it and then all of a sudden it was just stopped.
Right. Yeah. She said it was
That's,
just dead silent.
yeah, that's a lot of Bigfoot encounters, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Very, very
Which,
stereotypical.
yeah, which is why they started getting into the line of thinking of that Bigfoot's probably interdimensional and he's traveling through portals.
Right. And that's the theory I adhere to. I mean, I think it's possible that there's some small strain of, undiscovered apes, but I think there's a lot more strangeness going on regarding Bigfoot. And if you're willing to accept the fact that it could be interdimensional or something legitimately strange going on, that solves a lot of the issues as far as, well, why haven't we ever found a skeleton, or what do
Mm-hmm.
these things eat? How is there enough food? Well, if they're only in our dimension, reality plane, whatever you want to call it, for brief moments, none of those things are issues at that point.
Right. Right. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, to somebody who thinks that they think rationally, that would sound crazy. But
But the funny thing about it to me is it's almost like the more fantastic you make it, the easier it is for me to believe.
yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
I'm a little on the fence about a big monkey running around, but once we brought in portals and UFOs, I'm on board.
So my son was wicked into Bigfoot when he was a lot younger, and I used to be like, Bigfoot's not even real. And then my ex-wife would be like, "Oh, but he believes and he likes the show." And I was like, "Whatever." So it was Hunting Bigfoot, I think it was.
There's like 10 of those shows.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was I know there was a big curly-haired guy and a blonde woman, and then some other guy, but he loved that show. And thinking back on it, because I believe now, listening to people's story and how like convicted they are and telling these stories, and remember doing my regression therapy and remembering certain things that have happened to me, and then actually when he was into this show, I had what I thought was maybe a skinwalker or like a dog man or werewolf encounter in broad daylight. And then after that, I was just like, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
So it was that experience. I tried to be like, I'm just seeing shit. But like once I did the regression therapy and shit, I remembered that I did see it, which I did regression therapy, I think last year. And then I started recounting some other things about, my life, real things from my childhood that weren't that great, and then some of these experiences that I kind of like just put in the back of my mind. It was like that didn't really happen. Um, but I find it so interesting, like you said, that there hasn't been a discovery of bones, but we see there's these instances like the pictures and the videos and the footprints, where this and it ties into where we have underground military bases and they go into the side of a mountain where you can't even tell where the entrance is.
Right.
And there's people who see what looks to be like a portal on the side of a mountain up where nobody can get, and they see people standing there, then all of a sudden they're gone, or something like, there's just
Exactly.
so many things about what's going on that we don't even know, and the fact that people think that they know is like they know everything about how the world works. um I just think there's so much more to be discovered. There's just just our engineering of our own bodies, um our own selves, our own meat suits per se, um is so like, it's like the best machine. It's the most fantastic machine ever created, is our bodies and the way it works and the way it operates. If you ever studied anatomy in any kind of way, you could see how complicated it is.
Mhm.
And I think that the earth is just as complicated.
Definitely. And I think we're very naive as a people if we think we've got anything figured out. And I think people get too caught up in having to have an answer or having to have definitive proof. And to me, I don't think we're going to find definitive answers to any of these questions. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to have an answer. Okay, this is what aliens are, or this is what aliens are not. And I think people get so caught up in proof and answers that you kind of miss the journey.
Right.
And I think in some ways, like asking questions in the journey is more important than whatever the answers end up being. And I agree with you 100%. I think, people, I think at this point in time, people want to think we as a race have figured everything out, and it terrifies people that there's things we just have no idea about and probably never will.
Right.
But that's okay, I think.
Right. And there's like, so what is it, 85 or 90? It's either 85 or 90% of the ocean hasn't even been discovered.
Yeah.
So who's to say, like, what if there's something down there?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Um, but I'll just tell you my story of what I think is Skinwalker or Dogman.
Yeah, please do. So Dogman is something that probably we've been getting into in like the past 6 months or so. But it seemed like once I started looking into it, like all these different things popped up about Dogman. So this is something I don't know very much about. So I would love to hear your story. I'm kind of just obsessed with Dogman right now.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hearing it.
So when it first happened, I was just like, that didn't happen. I'm tired because I was on my way home back from work. And I started listening to podcasts and I started doing my own spiritual journey. And like I said, I did the regression therapy, and I remembered it. And I was like, I think that actually happened. And then listening to the stories about Dogman and Skinwalkers, I'm like, maybe that's what it was. And so anyways, I was coming home from work. We lived out in the middle of the woods. We could only see one neighbor from our house, and you could barely even see them at that point either. But anyways, it's broad daylight. I'm driving, and this dog comes right out into the middle of the road, and I stop and I look at it, and he looks at me, and he stares at me. And it was probably only like a minute, but it felt like forever. And I felt like he was looking at me right in the eyes. And I was just like, this is fucking weird. And it was a coyote. It was technically a coyote, but he was huge. He was big. Like, he had coyote colors. He didn't look like a wolf. He didn't look like a German Shepherd. But he had those coyote colors, the brown, the sandy blonde, and the little bit of black and gray. And he stared at me, and then he walks into the woods. I was like, that is weird. There's no collar. And so I pulled up and I got in line with where he went into the woods. And I was watching him, and he was walking really slow. And then he stopped and he turned around and he looked at me, which I thought was the fucking weirdest thing. Like, that part alone was was weird to me, that he would stop and be like,
So it
what
was
are you staring
behaving
at?
like not like you'd expect an
Yeah.
animal to
Right.
behave, sounds like.
Right, because if it was my dog and she just crossed the road in front of me, and me sitting in a car, no less, um, and she went into the woods, she wouldn't have turned around and been like, "What are you looking at?" kind of thing.
Right.
So, anyways, so he stood there and stared at me again for a little while, and then he turned around. It was almost like, "All right, you're gonna see some shit." And then he started walking, and there was like a little bit of an embankment, so it goes up a little bit, and then it went straight down on the other side, and there was this big pine tree. Like if I hugged it, I probably wouldn't get my hands around it. But anyways, so he gets up to it, and his paw comes up and turns into a human hand, puts his hand on the tree, and then
Wow.
almost kind of climbs over this embankment like a human, but in dog form. You know what I mean? Like just kind of like grabbing onto things and supporting his weight, and then putting his legs over instead of going leaping over like a dog would. And then he just went over and he was gone.
Damn.
I was just like, what the fuck was that? When I drove home, I was like, I didn't see that shit.
Wow, that's crazy. So if I can ask, like, did you have like any like sense of fear or whatnot about this? Because in my little bit of research with Dogman, it seems like most people have like a really visceral reaction to these things, whereas like a lot of Bigfoot encounters, it seems like are neutral or positive. It seems like overwhelmingly these Dogman encounters seem to be really negative. Did you have anything like that going on?
No. I was just more like thinking that I was crazy.
Just in shock?
Yeah. I was like, man, I must be tired. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
didn't know yeah, I don't know. We did just watch um the Benicio del Toro Wolfman not too long before that happened. You know what I mean? So I thought maybe I was just like, oh, well, maybe it's just a dream or something. But I do remember the dog. But I was like, I did see a coyote. I don't know about that part, but I think the more that I remember things that I've experienced, I think that is more likely to have happened than not.
Yeah, and I think when you see something legitimately strange, it leaves an impression on you. And I think we were talking the other day about like this whole dog man thing, because a lot of these reports are, oh, it was 7 feet tall or whatever. It's like, well, we know that human beings are very faulty with their
Yes.
size measurement. So anytime someone says how big it was, take that with a grain of salt. But even if it was like just a normal large sized dog and you see something like that stand up, that's gonna be weird. It's something that's out of place that should not be happening.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about it, the example I used was if we were driving to work tomorrow and an elephant crossed the road, that would be really weird. Like, even though there's something, we know what an elephant is, that's like a rational thing. It would
Mm-hmm.
be weird and it would leave an impression. And I think this type of stuff is the same way. Like, you're seeing something that your brain knows you're not supposed to be seeing.
Right. And then your brain tries to suppress it.
Exactly. That's why talking about this stuff is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Telling
Which
the
is
stories. Yes.
right, which leads me into this. This is another reason, one of the many reasons why I started doing this. And I know that I've talked to a few people like in real life, and they're like, "Oh, what do you think, you're going to be famous? You think you're going to be Joe Rogan, blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "No, I just want to talk to people." I was like, if it happens, cool,
Yeah.
but that's not the goal,
Exactly.
you know? And and there's people that put out podcasts that, you have to be a member to listen to it, or they'll only give you half of it, and then you have to pay them to listen to it, and it's not my bag.
Yeah. Well, and I think everybody who's doing what you're doing is doing a great service to people because, like Jenny was just saying, the more we talk about this kind of stuff, I think the internet and technology has been huge for the whole paranormal community because before, if something happened, you like you said, just suppress it and
Mhm.
oh, I'm crazy.
Talk yourself out of it. This didn't
Mhm.
happen.
But now with the internet and all of these forums for people to listen and research and talk to other people, it makes you feel not so crazy and not so alone. And I think that's one, really important. And I think that's two, why we're seeing a lot more reports of paranormal type stuff going on nowadays.
Right. And there are so many of these kinds of podcasts. Um, I follow them, they follow me. We actually have conversations. Actually, I have um scheduled to be on somebody else's podcast on the 20th.
Nice.
So that one will be interesting. I don't know if we're going to be doing a swap cast or if he just wants to have me as the guest. Either or. Um, it's all the people that I've met doing this has it's been interesting. Everybody's been so friendly. You guys, everybody else that I've had on.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't been doing this seriously very long, but I mean, we're overwhelmed by how cool and supportive everybody we've met is. I mean, we've been to some conventions, met some really cool people. We've been on some really cool people's podcasts, yourself included, and so we're just thankful for this community and that we've kind of been welcomed with open arms. So it's very cool to see everybody supporting each other and sharing ideas. And I think that's a big thing in the paranormal community is people just need to talk more and share more. Like everybody wants their thing to be the thing. And I feel like at the end of the day, a lot of this is just issues of language. We're all talking about the same thing here. One person's dogman is another person's skinwalker is another person's werewolf. I mean, we're probably all talking about the same thing there, and I feel like language is a big barrier in our understanding of all this as much as we'll ever have an understanding. And we get too tied to what we call things and not the general idea behind them and the fact that there's something a lot of legitimately strange things going on. And I think it's all connected in some way. I don't claim to have those answers, but I got some ideas.
Right. I mean, if you want to get into that, like, I think we as people, as a species, are all connected. So the fact that any of this could be all connected is just makes it more real for me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Like consciousness and tapping into
Yes.
things that we don't really understand.
Right. Right. And you could get into conspiracies on that note, like where they want to keep the collective consciousness down, because if we realize how special we really are, then and we start agreeing or at least getting along, who knows what that damage that could do to the people that are in charge.
And
I agree with that.
absolutely. And like even on a lower level, like when you're worried about paying the power bill, you don't have time to think about this sort of thing. And you don't have time to ask questions and think critically and go a step further and be like, well, maybe these things we've been brainwashed to think our entire lives, maybe there's more to it than that. And I think you don't have to do very much digging below the surface before you realize there's more going on than what we've been told, in my opinion.
Yes, I am 100% in line with that. Shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah, no. There's a quote that I heard from a movie where there was a salesman. It was like the cutting edge of technology, and he was trying to sell this washing machine. I think it was a movie. He was trying to sell a washing machine and a refrigerator, and the woman was in the big city. She was with her family, and she was asking what they were, and the guy was explaining it to her, and so it was the electric company. He provides electricity, so you pay him for your electricity, and the guy the gentleman that was with her, I think, I don't know what he was to her because I've only seen like a clip of this, so I don't know like the exact movie was. But he says, if I buy that from you, or if I get rent that from you, then I won't be working for myself. I'll be working for you. And that, like, if you think about it, like our cars, um, our houses, we're working to pay all that stuff off.
Yeah.
And this is what I was gonna say that I forgot and led me into this, but we're the only species that pays to live on this planet. And I honestly don't even like I get it. I get it. You provide a service or whatever, you deserve payment or whatever, but I just think it's interesting how we've become such money grubbing
Well, and just
things.
how hard you have to work
to stay in the same place.
Yeah, just to breathe air.
Right.
Just living is expensive. We're not even talking about anything extravagant. Just getting by is a struggle. So I mean, if we're all stuck in that, we don't have time to ask these big esoteric questions and question, the nature of our reality and all that kind of stuff. So no, not to get too conspiratorial, but like you said, I mean, I think there definitely is a reason that we live in a system that we do that doesn't want us asking questions and doesn't want us thinking about things in a different way. And, that's why I called our venture the framework, because I think it's so important for people to ask questions, dig below the surface, don't just accept what's always been told to you, build your own framework and your own ideas. So
Yeah.
that's why I called it that, and that piggybacks perfect into what you were talking about.
It does. It really does. So there's a lot of videos and pictures of Bigfoot blurry. Do you think that Bigfoot is just blurry?
So this is actually a conversation we had at one point in time. We went to a concert not so long ago, and we're looking at our videos from the concert the next day, and of course they're like all over the place. It just struck me. I was like, man, we couldn't get a good picture of the stage from 100 feet away. So I mean, when you look at it that way, I think all that makes a little bit more sense. And I think, again, when you factor in you're seeing something legitimately strange that your brain doesn't quite know how to process, and you're going to be nervous and scared and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I think the whole blurry, why haven't we got a good picture, that might be
because you're scared.
Yeah, it might be simpler than we make it out to be. But
yeah. So do you have any other experiences?
Jenny has all of her kind of paranormal shadow people type stuff that she talked about on the previous episode, but the Men in Black thing is basically the biggest one I have. I've never seen a UFO, never seen cryptid or anything, but I think I've always, like I said, been interested in this kind of stuff, and looking back, I wonder if that situation at a very young formative age kind of had something to do with my interest in weird stuff. But no, I've never had anything else I would consider paranormal other than that.
Okay. All right. Do you think that the powers that be or whatever, do you think that they put movies out because they're telling us what they're doing, like karmic, that they need our consent in order for these things to happen?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's very possible, and I think a lot of this boils down to almost like the government having plausible deniability and all this. Right. But I think it's very possible that the government doesn't know as much as maybe a lot of people think they do. I think they might know, this much more about everything that's going on than we do. And so I think maybe they are, putting breadcrumbs out there. So if, when, whatever, something eventually does happen, they could be like, oh, well, we knew that, but, national security, we couldn't let you guys in on too much. So I think that's very possible. And I think if they are doing that, it's because they're trying to figure shit out just like we are,
Right. I think they know that Bigfoot's out there, like you said, like the positions of the bases in the national parks. I think it's specifically for things of that nature.
Well,
I was just gonna say, and if you even take it just a little bit lighter, even the things like Marvel movies, the multiverse and stuff, I think that things are being sprinkled into our everyday life so it doesn't seem strange,
Right. So
yeah,
fanatical.
Well, and something I thought of while you were talking about the bases and Bigfoot and whatnot. Are you familiar with the land between the lakes?
No.
Okay, so this is an area, if I'm remembering correctly, and don't quote me on any of this. I believe it's on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky.
Okay.
And it was this area between these two rivers. And I'm not sure the time period. It was like 40s, 50s, 60s, somewhere in there. Kind of the same thing I was talking about with the base at my house. It was seized. This land was seized for eminent domain. They flooded this whole area to make a nature preserve. So I mean, that just doesn't seem like a good use of government time, effort, and energy to displace all these people, flood it just for a nature area. And so anyway, there's a lot of reports of a dogman type creature in the land between the lakes. So your dogman thing made me think about that. You should definitely look up the land between the lakes, because going back to what you said, why would the government do that? Well,
right.
Maybe they knew there was something there and they didn't want people there discovering it. So if we seize this land, flood it, use it for our own, malevolent purposes, you have a little bit more control over it at that point.
That's interesting. I have heard a lot of stories of Dogman in Kentucky. So Kentucky's that would make sense.
Weird place. Like the whole Appalachia Ridge, it seems like is just weird. And that gets back to the cave systems and quartz deposits and all that kind of stuff that I don't claim to understand all of it. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in that area for sure.
Yeah. And then on the eastern side of Tennessee, you have I'm not familiar with the name of it, but it's a little thing like CERN. You know what CERN is?
Mm-mm.
So CERN, I believe it's in France. It's basically like they're creating a portal and things come out of it.
Oh wow.
And every time they turn it on, it like weird shit happens.
Oh wow. No, I have to check that out too.
So I believe it might be actually inside of Knoxville, but it's in the Knoxville area. I know that. And there's a lot of stories of dogman, aliens, and around that area too.
Well, yeah, and East Tennessee, that's right here on the North Carolina border, where lots of missing persons and caves and all kinds of strange stuff going on there too. So
have you looked into the book for the missing 411?
So I've had a hard time finding the books. Every time I found them on Amazon, it was like $100 a book for a used one.
Wow.
But it's probably been a couple years ago now. Just random happenstance, I ended up in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, at a Bigfoot conference, and David Politis, the missing 411 guy, was one of the speakers there. And between this happened in June, July, somewhere like that. And like my recovered Men in Black memory was like April, May. So between those two things, that's like what really sent me down this path. Some of the other speakers were really good. Ron Moorhead was there. He's a big name in Bigfoot, but David Pilatus was the one that like really lit a fire under me. And he was talking about, the Hunt for the Skinwalker book, and I had never heard of that at that point. And as soon as I got home, I went and bought that book. And like we were talking about, there's government stuff and portals and cryptids and UFO, like everything, rolled into that. So, long-winded answer. Yeah, I have not read the Missing 411 books, but I've watched the movies. I'm super into all that. I've seen him speak, but yeah. So
That's interesting. I really want to have that book. There's a lot of interesting stories in that.
Yeah, I think there's like 7 or 8 of them at this point, and I was gonna buy one of them at the convention, and by the time I made the rounds at the end of the day, he was already gone and had taken all his books.
Oh man,
So missed out on that.
So Callie, on my last episode, she just sent me a picture of a book to this morning, called Beyond a Pale Horse.
Got that one down here in the stack.
Do you have it?
Behold a Pale Horse. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Behold a Pale Horse. She was
hang on a second, I'll grab it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
He loves his books. He loves.
I've been collecting books too a lot lately. When it's nice out, I'll get my hammock out and put it right outside here, and I'll just sit there and read books.
This is it. So,
yes. Yep. That's what she sent me.
And normally you can find this one at like Barnes and Noble. Like every Barnes and Noble I've ever been to in their self-transformation section, this one's in it.
Nice. So yeah, because my sister and we did the intro for her episode, and I had talked about how the term conspiracy theory popped up in 1964, right after the JFK assassination. She's like, that's so interesting that you say that on my episode, because that was like one of my first reports I've ever did in school was on JFK. And then she told me about this book, and she said that goes into a lot of like government cover-ups and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Some of the stuff is, I think, a little bit out there, even for me, but I mean, it's worth a read. I think, I think the more we read, the better. I mean, even if you read something that you don't agree with, you're still forming your opinions and your thoughts. But there's some good stuff in there. The guy kind of goes off the rails every now and then, but it's at least interesting to think about, and it's another feather to have in your cap at that point, I think. So yeah, I'd recommend at least giving it a go. So.
And it was published in 91, right?
Early mid 90s, yeah, something like that. I can look here in the beginning, but let's see here. Yeah, 91. Yeah.
Okay. All right, because he said something about 9/11 in it.
I don't recall that right off the top of my head, but it's been a while since I've read it at this point. If you did, it must not have made much of an impression. But yeah, it's pretty wild. Like I said, a little out there in some parts. He takes some hard turns on some stuff, but it's also some good information. Well, at least good things to think about. So
right, and that's all we can really do is to think about these things, and like we've been saying this entire time, talk about them and share our personal stories, and become tighter as a community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no definitive answers. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. We're just all trying to figure stuff out, So
yeah. So do you have a name? Are you calling your book The Framework as well?
Yeah, that's the intention. So, and then the subtitle is going to be the connections between UFOs, cryptids, and the paranormal. So that's the idea.
Do you have a deadline date at all, or?
No, I'm just kind of working on it whenever I get time, and as I find information and start putting things together. I would like to have something done by the end of this year, but I feel like once I like sit down and actually start, banging it out, it'll come pretty quickly. But it's a process, so we're getting there.
You keep all the notes in like a notebook for now, or
No,
have you even started typing it out?
oh yeah, it's started. I've got a Word document. I've got like an outline, and I'm just kind of like filling in the outline. And it's basically just like notes and word vomit at this point. I'm just trying to kind of put everything together. So,
Nice. Are you gonna publish it yourself, or are you gonna get a publisher?
probably at first just try to self-publish a few, just so when we go to conventions and whatnot, you can just be like, "Hey, here's this thing I did." But if I could get a publisher at some point, that would be awesome. But not really banking on that, at least at first. So.
Right. I've always wanted to be a writer myself, since I was a kid, and I've been working on a book myself, like like I want to be a fictional writer, um, and I've been working on it for like 4 years, and I barely got anywhere with it. It's
Fiction writing is a whole different animal. That's pretty
yeah.
difficult.
I sit down, like I know exactly like what I want to, like how I want the story to go. I know a lot, like all the, like I did all the brainstorming, I did the framework,
There you
um,
go.
and I there's just like all the little pieces that go in between certain things. I'm just like, how do I want this to go?
That's the hardest part, the connective tissue between everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've tried to do some fiction writing in the past, and it's not easy.
No. All right. So what, we're at an hour. Is there anything else you want to get into, or
I think I'm good. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I got to tell my jokes last time. So
yeah, you did. How's the witchiness coming?
it's good. It's good. The more I get into it, I've kind of come to a conclusion on a few things. And I'll try to make this very brief. It just hit me a couple of days ago that I've always been a witch, but I didn't know it. It was framed under the guise of being in a organized religious situation that was not healthy by any means. And I'm doing the same things that I've always done, but they're not driven by fear.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Like
so yeah.
Ritual and
Yeah.
Right.
things like that. So
Yeah. So everything's good. So yeah.
It feels lighter, don't it?
Oh, it's so much lighter when you're just not scared of going to hell every day. You know?
or scared of incubuses.
Yeah, that's good too. So.
Oh my god.
Everybody check out the previous episode.
Yes. Episode 13.
13.
Yeah, 13.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, do you want to plug your stuff one more time, one more again?
Okay, so again, I am Orin. This is Jenny. We're with the Framework UFO Research Center. You can find us on Instagram, and that's at the Framework UFO. Jenny's Instagram is 100%
that witch.
That witch.
You'll find me if you get that far.
Yeah.
She has a few underscores.
A few underscores.
Yeah, there's underscores involved. She wasn't the first to think of it. But and you can find her through mine if need be. But we've also got a Gmail, and that's the Framework UFO at Gmail. And we're just, like I said, trying to get out there, talk to people, meet people, share our stories, hear people's stories. So if anybody wants to connect with us, we always love meeting people, talking to cool people like yourself. So thank you for having us on. We really appreciate it. And in closing, if I could say anything, like I said earlier, just ask questions, don't accept what we've always been told, and build your own framework. So
nice. Nicely said. I like that. All right, guys. So this is where the weird ones are. You know how to reach me. Again, if you want to get in some stories that you might have that to go with Orin and his research. He just told you how to reach him, so do that. And with that, I bid you all adieu, and I hope you spend tonight or the next or maybe even the rest of your life just being weird.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.
Because in the end, none of us have very long on this earth. Life is fleeting. And if you're ever distressed, cast your eyes to the summer sky, when the stars are strung across the velvety night, and when a shooting star streaks through the blackness, turning night into day. Make a wish.